Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Category Visionaries. Today we're speaking with Ken Bagnall, CEO and founder of Silent Push, a cybersecurity technology company that's raised $22 million in funding. Ken, what's up, man? How are you?
Hi, Brett. Good to be here. Thanks for having us on.
No problem. Super excited to have you here. Let's go ahead and kick right off. What does Silent Push do? And then we'll dive into some other questions there about your previous company.
Yeah, so it's a SaaS platform. We expose threat actors as they set up and are managing their infrastructure before it's used in attacks. So we share that information with customers as indicators of future attack. So it's very much a step forward for cybersecurity as a whole, because prior to this, people could only share what had already attacked somebody or what had affected someone. So it was always historical information. And then because threat actors have access to be able to set up unlimited infrastructure nowadays at an incredible pace, someone needed to take this on and actually watch them managing their infra and share it with people so that you could actually defend against it preemptively.
Now, I know you must be someone who likes pain because you've gone through this journey twice. So this is your second cybersecurity startup. So you're crazy enough and twisted enough to go back at it again. Let's talk about that first company. I'm sure you learned a ton from that experience. Like, what are some of the big takeaways that you've had?
Yeah, so I think everybody should go through it twice. No one should go through it once so we started an email security company a long time ago, and then we sold it to FireEye in Milpitas in California. And for us, we treated it like, if you're playing a video game and you get through a level and then you get to go to the shop and buy more machine guns for level 2. That's how we treated that acquisition. So we very much leveled up and prepared ourselves for the kind of top tier enterprise market for our next startup. We treated it as a very much learning experience. And so there's a lot of the same team with me in Silent Push who've been through that whole journey from the email laundry to FireEye email security. Then I was VP of all FireEye products. Then we started Silent Push. And of course, all of the problems that we wanted to fix really showed themselves to us when we were in FireEye, dealing with enterprise problems, because there's this whole category of threat intelligence, and it wasn't really contributing anything to our detections of, new campaigns. And we were supposed to have the best threat intelligence available, right? So we realized we really have to make a new type of intelligence that will actually be able to help people defend themselves. But it's a good journey to go on. I think there's a load of things we would do differently, which we are doing differently this time to the first time. Firstly, on the first one, we were selling our product to small and medium enterprise through MSPs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty horrific, to be honest. I think is the only way to describe it. It's one of those things that sounds fantastic, right? All these other people are selling on your behalf. You have recurring revenue. It was also a SaaS platform, but it's actually the appreciation for what you do is missing. So, we used to do incredibly complex things in that email security product and detect all sorts of things that other people couldn't. But it was a complete waste of time because the customers, they didn't know if you're stopping it or not, and they didn't give a damn, really. So when we switched and we were acquired by FireEye and we had people calling us in these enormous companies, how the hell are you guys managing to stop this? No one can stop this stuff. And we go, oh my God, we've just wasted so much time in our lives selling to the wrong people, right? This is our actual audience. So we've never left the enterprise space since then. And the weird thing is, it is just as easy to sell to the largest company in the world as the smallest.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. I think a lot of founders don't think that, right? I think the general mindset is like SMB is easy or mid-market is easy, enterprise is hard, but it's all selling at the end of the day.
That's a complete illusion. It depends on where you are as well, right? So the United States enterprise market is definitely a far more open to new ideas type market than others. It's more difficult for sure. And you can get the ear of who you need to speak to in the United States a lot quicker. So it's easier definitely to start here and then to take on the rest of the world than start, somewhere incredibly difficult like Ireland and try and come this direction. There's a huge difference in those two things.
When you sold the company, was there part of you that's like, I'm never doing this again? That was too hard of a journey. Like, were you done, or were you the other camp of like, let's go, time for round two, like, I'm going to put in my time post exit and then go build a new company? Like, what was your kind of state of mind at that time?
Yeah, I think, an actual acquisition journey takes a bit out of you. It's the effort of the sale of the company and the due diligence and stuff. That's quite a relentless process for the selling founder. So you definitely need a couple of months to breathe after that. But I think that's about as long as it takes before you're right, let's go and tear up some new stuff, and cause some trouble. So that's definitely how it went, So yeah, we were probably polite for 2 months, I think. And then we started causing trouble where we were, which I think the place needed a bit of trouble at the time, to be honest.
And if we look at silent push, what was it about this problem specifically that made you say like, yep, that's it? Given your background in the space, given that you had an exit, I know founders are highly sought after by VCs after they've had a successful exit. So I don't want to say you can do anything, but there's a lot of opportunity. I think when you're a post-exit founder, why this problem when there's probably a wide range of problems that you could have solved?
Yeah, that kind of leads into a bit of a bigger question because it's kind of a philosophical question, right? What's your purpose in life? It has to be more than just making money, right? You've got to have impact and you got to try and solve big problems. And this is a huge problem. And it's one that we found really infuriating because we found all of the companies in the threat intel space to be very spoofy. There was a lot of hubris and marketing nonsense really about what they were doing. And it definitely needed a real shakeup, right? Because, we could see the problem in our day-to-day existence, right? That, none of that information is really stopping any malicious traffic. And, it was all designed to kind of sound cool, right? I'm going to call the threat actor Fuzzy Bear and, give them a fancy kind of avatar or something. It's just ridiculous, childish nonsense, right? And it was just marketing nonsense and not making a difference in a place where we can't afford people not to make a difference. Cybersecurity and, the security of the nation as a whole, can't be at the whims of people trying to make a fast buck and come out with a lot of marketing nonsense, right? You got to have real things that make an impact. So this was easy decision for us to step into this space.
What did the first 6 months look like? What were you working on and what were those early days like?
Yeah, so what we're doing is a tremendously difficult thing. So there was a 3-year build before we could sell anything because we monitor all changes on the internet every day and we collect all the information ourselves. So we're one of the most aggressive data collectors there are in the world. And on top of that, we make these behavioral analytics. So that's how we group up management behaviors of all infrastructure that exists, right? And then we just assign it to particular threat actors. But we're equally monitoring all infrastructure that exists as the threat actor infrastructure. It's just that, we've assigned their automations and management techniques to cluster their stuff up so that we can publish what they're setting up each day. But we have a view of everything. So it was an enormous task and it comes in layers of usefulness in that we have to get all the data first. So we made our data available via API early on with a lot of kind of beta customers and design customers who had access just to data earlier on, before we started building what that should look like in terms of, what's a UI for everything that exists look like, right? It's quite a complex task and it's always evolving and it'll keep evolving. It's not a product that will ever be finished. If it's working correctly, it should never be finished, right? This is something that has to keep changing because the problem changes as well all the time, particularly if they discover different ways we're tracking them. They immediately go and change how they manage their infrastructure to avoid us tracking them. So it's a never-ending kind of evolution, which is the kind of product you want to be in. It's a fun game of cat and mouse. So you just need to make sure you gather other people who enjoy the game to play it with you. So that's kind of what we have here. We've got a pretty focused team. Everybody's really into what we do. And a lot of people try and come to us from other places where work may have got a little bit more boring so that they can be on this team and do what matters,
Yep. Amazing. I love that.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode.
I feel like with your type of product, like it makes sense that's, very mission oriented. There's a lot of personal pride that has to come from working on it. Like, especially if you look out, even outside of cyber, like an e-commerce widget or, website optimization, like all these types of things, like great products adding value. But I do have to imagine that you don't wake up every day, feeling this like burning desire to go out and do work.
Yeah, that's it. I think we're highly motivated because of the amount of impact we have.
What was the early go-to-market strategy, and then what's it evolved to? Like, what does it look like today?
Yeah, I think we always had a pretty clear idea about what way we would knock down the first pin, let's say. Don't know if that analogy works for you, but so for us, we kind of have a marketing phrase, let's say, which is to shout loudly in a small room, right? You try and gather the smallest group of people possible as your audience and make sure all they hear is what you do. So that's why threat intelligence as well was a very, very good market to go into, because they gather themselves into little groups of practitioners in each industry vertical. It's almost designed for you to easily market to. So I would say we've had a very easy time breaking into the US market. We have, I think 50% of the global top Fortune 50 use us. Like we only launched that a year and a half ago.
Wow. What do you attribute that to? Does it help? I'm guessing that you have a track record in this space. You're not some young kid out of Stanford saying like, I have an idea. Like you have a track record, right? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, people know that we've been doing, threat detection for 20 years, right? So we've a good eye on adversaries and how they manage their infrastructure in order to know what information to make to monitor them managing their infrastructure. So yeah, we do have a good historical story to go with what we do, but also we approached it in a very particular way in that we offered ourselves as experts for all of these different threat intel groups. So when they're concerned about something that's going on, we would always speak, so in the early days, I would always speak, but, we've got a huge threat research team. So they take turns now speaking as the experts to all the different ISACs, or the groups of threat intel teams. And that works well. And, we always understand there's a give and get. So we give information so that people get to know who we are, and it raises our brand awareness for sure. And you also establish an awful lot of trust, right? And people appreciate that we're seeing things before anybody else and that we have this insight that nobody else has. And it's very effective, when they become customers and we actually let them see all of it, it becomes very effective for them to defend themselves, right? We also have a free community app. So we try and give access to the underlying data and a lot of our hunting tools to the security community. And that's very effective as well in terms of building brand awareness. And there's still a lot we can do with that. I don't think we've fully explored that journey yet. But that's a very complex thing to do because I've seen it go right and wrong for many people. Mm-hmm. If you give too much away for free or it's too open, people will take and you'll never even have their details, right, to contact them. It's a very, very delicate game to play because I think a number of people in our sector have tried that and it not work as well. So we're always adjusting the balance there in terms of what is the give and take to make sure that people do enter like a pipeline at some point and then start to move along and need more for their enterprise.
When it comes to research to generate brand awareness, a company that comes to mind for me is Risk IQ. Not sure if you remember them. They were acquired by Microsoft a while back. Sure. Worked with them for about 4 years up until their acquisition. Awesome team there. Like very heavy focus for them on research. It was research to drive media awareness and customer awareness, but it was very much research heavy. Is that how you're generally viewing it too? Like there's a brand awareness strategy tied back to research?
Yeah, that is how we approach it as well, for sure. And then we try and give, critical research into each of those threat intelligence member organizations or into any threat sharing groups that we're part of to make sure that people are aware. Because you can really separate what you can do by doing research and publishing it. Because research is it can work and it can backfire, right? Because many, many traditional threat intel companies continually publish research. Mostly it's an echo chamber, right? So someone discovers something and then they all discover something and write about it, right? So it starts to seem like there's only this tiny number of threat actors that everybody's chasing. So it's important to continually, show how you actually uncover new unknown things and track them in new novel ways. And it's pretty horrific when you start doing that, where the gaps are and what other people are seeing, right? So we've been tracking the Chinese triads, the crime infrastructure for 2 years now, and there's very little published on it. I'm horrified, I'm horrified that people aren't. I'm sure you've read about pig butchering and all this kind of, fake investment scams and all that. That's part of their infrastructure. They've kind of 7 main crimes that are sorted out very neatly, by the way, with DNS records into these little pillars of crime. But it's huge. It's like 1.1 million host names or something involved. Like, it's very, very large. And completely flying under the radar for all this time. People were kind of dealing with one abuse report at a time or something, instead of mapping all of their infrastructure and how they manage it and exposing it in real time. So I'm surprised not to have seen other people then, follow such a large crime group, but they don't seem to.
Why do you think they're not doing it?
I think it's because they can't. I think they don't have the ability to kind of see the volume or see it from such a large view as we have, right? Because we're looking at, everything from a very high level, while other people are kind of looking for a particular brand being impersonated or something. So they always see the one thing out of the 1.1 million there are. They don't see the 1.1 million and then focus down on what's in the 1.1. Well, we're always from the kind of wide aperture first, and then we narrow down, which is, it's great for sales motion, because we first came across that because a particular customer, who we won't name, was having a real problem with their, fake trading apps pretending to be them. And of course, they're focused from their brand perspective, and they'd hired, the usual kind of brand impersonation type companies to deal with it. And they're all dealing with it in that way. And it's a very, very weak starting point. Well, we immediately mapped out how that infrastructure was managed, where's the rest of it, what's in there. And suddenly we have all of it, right? And then, from a company point of view, you can now sell that information to everybody who's been impersonated, right? So you can sell it lots and lots of times. And that's, on a commercial end of things, that's very powerful. So, as well as being, it's technically very, very strong and a great thing to be able to do. Commercially, it's fantastic, though, because once you've done a piece of work, you can sell it over and over again.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their U.S. and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
One thing to go back to, so you mentioned, you have the free product that's working for you. I know it's not worked for others. I can think back on probably 5 or 6 conversations I've had with cybersecurity tech builders just on this podcast, where they say they tried it and they're now retreating because they didn't see it work. What's your secret? Like, how come it works for you? Like, what do you do that others don't, who aren't succeeding here?
Well, there's a very difficult balance, right? Because the people who are using it will be, at an operations level, there'll be researchers, and they may not be people who are willing to put the work in to champion you in their company to get a budget to buy the product.
Mm.
And you're trying to establish, who the people using the product are and whether they are kind of a worthy champion or not. So a lot of them want to just, get free data and, use as much as they can for free. And then if you shut yours down, they'll just move on to another one. But they're not really going to be a product champion. So you've got to limit what they get. You got to get people to log in. Having an open web page where people can just do lookups is I think that's one that many people have to retreat from, right? Because you've got no capture. You've no idea who's doing what lookups, and you've no idea if they're smart or not. So one of the things that we want to see is whether our free users are clever or not. So, what do they do with your product? Do they do kind of the obvious, or do they start playing around and doing some clever things? Because then they're probably from a pretty decent and mature team. And so we try and nurture them, send them suggestions, etc., things to do, complicated queries, and let them grow. And it's worked very well for us. I mean, maybe the largest company in the world came to us. They've been using us for 6 months before we really knew. And, by the time they booked the first meeting with us, they had like 13 people on the call and stuff, and they all knew everything about what we could do, which is a beautiful starting point, right? So it's very hard though to balance, like people have to log into your free products for a start. I'd say that's rule number one, right? And this is, I think people talk about, product-led growth strategies and stuff. This is not strictly a product-led growth strategy. It is some sort of a weird hybrid that is suitable to our position and what we're doing. And that's what it has to be. You've got to like nurture them to the point that they are an enterprise pipeline contact, right? I mean, that is the aim for people who are in your free app. You got to nurture them to that point, because there is no point in going to all the trouble of inventing great tech and trying to make a difference if it never actually gets consumed by any enterprise customers and no one's paying you for it, right? Because all those people who use the stuff for free and never champion products like us in their company to get the budget for it, they are the same people who are moaning at every conference about the state of the security industry and, oh, how come like VCs and private equity, ruin all the companies, Well, if you lazy bastards went out and got budget for those companies, that would not be a problem,
Outside of that motion with, converting free users, are you typically selling top down? Like, do you target the CISO and then work your way down? Do you start at like the director VP of threat intelligence, then work from there? Like, what's a typical starting point, or is there not?
Yeah, we don't generally go for the CISOs. We stay in the threat intel team and then move up. I think there's problems with the reputation of the word threat intel in the CISO office, which is, why we went into this space in the first place, because it was problematic. So I think it's hard to go in there as a threat intel product. You got to go in as something else. So generally, people on the threat intel team or even on the IR team, they may already be obsessed with us, and then they champion us up. And then it's very easy when it goes that way. While it's a much harder conversation with a CISO, because, when you start with, we can now map adversary infrastructure and see it before it's used, they'll be skeptical. While the others have kind of seen how we do it. They've tried to do a bit of it themselves in the community app, but they understand that we can do it and that we know how to do it. So, they can be very strong champions bringing us up to the CISO level.
We're going to move in now to the final couple of questions. So let's do a role play here. Let's imagine I come to you and I say, Ken, I want to build a cybersecurity technology company and a platform based on everything you learned throughout your career, building 2 companies now. Like, what's your advice to me, the founder of a new cybersecurity tech company?
So firstly, I'd say don't do it unless it matters. We don't need any more rubbish cybersecurity products. We need something that has impact and matters. So like, if you've got something that has impact and it matters, go hard. That's what I'd say. I think when it comes to fundraising and stuff, you got to be really careful about who you partner with. Like, are they a VC who cares about things that matter? Are they singing off that same hymn sheet, or are they just like a money factory, right? You need to be very careful about who you're partnering with, because it could be like having a friend that's a crocodile, right? It's a cool pet, but he might take your arm off.
I love it. Now, final question for you. Let's zoom out 3 to 5 years from today. What's the vision? What's the big picture vision here?
Yeah, I think we've a lot of work to do. We've a lot more research to do. We want to be closer to all the endpoints and the points of detection, with information going back and forth to us. I think at the moment, it's very easy for us to pick off really large companies. Everybody understands what we're doing at that level, and they have the teams that, put us across the security stack and have impact. But we want to be able to get to everybody, because we're making a big difference in terms of the effectiveness of security as a whole. So we have to think about how we can get ourselves down to smaller companies. And that's going to have to be through kind of technical partnerships with, the kind of endpoint and firewall companies and that type of thing, that we can get our type of information into them to affect a broader range of companies. And obviously, we want to make sure this is incredibly global and not just US focused. I think one of the dangers of the US being such a good market is that other markets seem very difficult. You have to be really embedded with a partner before you get anywhere, particularly Europe. It's a much harder market. So, you've got to lift your game to play that one afterwards. So I think we really need to go hard on our international growth and think about technical partnerships to bring ourselves down the company size as well.
Amazing. I love the vision. I really love this conversation. Before we wrap here, if there's any founders, any builders listening in, they want to follow along with you, where should we send them?
Well, Ken Bagnall on LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to get hold of me, I'd say. And yeah, I'm always happy to help. We have partnerships with lots of startups. We often have like data sharing agreements with lots of startups. We try and do what we can to get people going. And I sit in the advisory board for a lot of other startups as well.
Amazing. Hopefully you don't get just overrun with spam now for people reaching out. Or maybe it'll be good. We'll see. Ken, thank you so much. It's been a blast.
Yeah, great. Thanks, man, Brett. Really nice talking to you.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.